I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I'm recording a couple of quick snippets from the comments of episodes that I've done recently. And I'm doing this while I'm waiting for my daughter to show up so we can go to dinner and an aerial show that is put on by the studio that I attend. So these are the people that I hang with, literally. The first is in response to my videos on Robert Malone. KW Norton sent me to a couple of very interesting websites. One of them is Outraged Human. And what they were pointing out is Malone's involvement in a nanotherapeutics company. Now, this is by Frederick, Maryland, so close to my hometown. And it's something that is close enough to D.C. and also Frederick is right where Fort Detrick is, where all of the bioweapons are being developed. But that isn't what interested me. In the list of all the accomplishments, if you can call them that he lists, there were ones that were not highlighted because they were like among millions, multimillion and billion-dollar contracts. There were ones for $350,000 for something called What a Smoke. And this was in 2015 to develop a protocol for e-cigarettes, a standardized electronic cigarette for clinical research. Why? Why would the Department of Defense be doing something with e-cigarettes, and why would Robert Malone be involved in it? So then when I do a search on e-cigarettes and fatalities, I come up with a Washington Post article that is from the January of 2020 that talks about what we know about the mysterious vaping-linked illnesses and deaths, January 2020. So here's my question. Is there a possibility that that has been a delivery system for whatever we're calling a virus, but whatever might be a different thing, as J.J. Couey has been pointing out? So I just feel like this is odd and is worth someone investigating. The second snippet is in response to my video, The Devil and Naomi Wolf, and that has gotten such great, deep conversations in those threads, and I recommend that you check these out on Substack, because that's where half or 3/4 of the story is really happening, is in those comment threads. So if you're not already a part of them, you should look at them and keep looking back to see what else has come up. One person who responded to that is a young man who lives in Australia named Isaac Middle. And Isaac has been putting together information on the Shemitah. So what the Shemitah is are 7-year cycles in the Judaic calendar, and that culminate in the time of Jubilee. But rather than this being a now all your debts are forgiven kind of thing, instead, this is much, much more insidious. Now, Isaac didn't even recognize, after reading my article about the Semites being the sons of Shem, who were given dominion over the whole world, and also the Canaanites to be their slaves, he didn't put together that the Shemitah is about the sons of Shem, that there is that connection. And in this, I've also realized that the point that I'm trying to make with all this is that there are 2 versions of Judaism, and that only one has really survived. The version that has survived is an imperial version. It's something that's really focusing on genealogy and who has the right to rule. The other version, which has been lost to us, is the Zealot Gnostic version, and that is a revolutionary, anti-imperial form of Judaism, and that's the one that I think we need to get back. The same is true for Christianity. The story of Jesus is an imperial story in which Caesar is God, as I suspect Pharaoh is in the Old Testament. But there's another version in which the Messiah wasn't Caesar, but the Messiah was named Judas. Judas the Sicariot, the Galilean, Judas the Nazarene. And that's someone who was standing up to the Roman Empire, and we need that form of Christianity along with the form of Judaism that led up to him and that he embodied. Back to the Shemitah. What Isaac is pointing out in his delightfully named Down the Wombat Hole, and who also does wombat memes and looks at all of these things being intersectionally combined because wombat holes stretch for miles and their burrows all interconnect. So that's what we're trying to do when we look down the wombat hole. Isaac looks at these starting with 2001 and the collapse of the Twin Towers and all of the chaos that entailed. And I also have looked at the dancing Israelis as part of that and how much Mossad was involved in that collapse. Then he goes to 2008 with the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the entire financial crisis. And I think there's much more to be said about that from the research I've done into 2008. He then looks at 2015 as a relatively quiet time. And who knows, we might be able to even dig up more in that wombat hole if we really look at 2015 and what was going on. Isaac also looks at both Lehman Brothers and the Twin Towers happening in September, which is Rosh Hashanah, the end of the Jewish New Year. And so now what we're in, he says, is perhaps the Jubilee year, the one that is the bonus year in between those cycles of 7 that add up to 49 and then need one more year to get to 50. So what he's looking at is whether September 2022 to 2023 is the Jubilee year. And that has an ominous overtone to it because according to the story of Shem, having those debts be forgiven means that everything reverts back to the original owners. And under the Jewish tradition within the Bible, within the Old Testament, that is always the Jews. That's always the Semites, not the Jews. I don't think we should be using that term. I think we should be using Semites as the imperial religion that's been preserved in the Old Testament or the Torah. So I think it's worth watching his sunrise rant from Australia and looking at how he connects all these different dots and how he sees this time in March as the halftime show for the Jubilee year and what he sees coming ahead by the time that we get to September. So I'll end with those two, but also if you go to the notes on my 5th generation warfare isn't throwing pixel dust, there are some beautiful comments that are left there to Peter and Ginger Bregan, who are now subscribers. So there's some really heartfelt appreciation from people who say, you really changed my life. When you talked about this or that different drug interaction, that changed the course of my life. And I have friends who say the same thing. So I am really touched, and also their feeling of being protected and being safe when they spoke up for the truth is something that I have internalized. And some of the people in the comments have been saying that I'm brave, but I'm not brave. I'm fearless. And if you haven't caught those videos, here's 5th generation warfare isn't throwing pixel dust, and this is The Devil and Naomi Wolf. Thank you for being a part of my community.